Welcome to the debate. You wake up at 2 a.m. You look at the person sleeping next to you and you realize, well, you are staring at a complete stranger. The love is gone, so why don't you leave?
It's a chilling question, isn't it?
It really is. Tonight we explore the sunk cost fallacy in relationships and the terrifying reality of being trapped in a dead marriage because you are frankly too afraid to start over.
Which is a terrifying scenario, but yet it is a deeply pervasive, silent epidemic sweeping through modern marriages right now.
We are looking at what the source material identifies as the sunk cost roommate phase.
Right, exactly.
Millions of couples, specifically those hitting their 40s and 50s, find themselves navigating this exact crisis. They are caught in these entirely dead, loveless marriages, but they stay. And the question at the core of our discussion is why they stay. And more importantly, whether staying is actually the wrong choice. I look at this from a structural, traditionalist perspective.
Okay, the traditionalist view, let's hear it.
Yeah, so when we talk about a marriage of 15 or 20 years, we are talking about a profound, binding contract. You have built an entire life.
Sure, you've accumulated things.
Not just things. You have a shared mortgage. You are raising children. You have established social status and community roots. Walking away from all of that simply because a romantic spark has faded strikes me as financially ruinous and frankly immature. Staying through the so-called roommate phase is the responsible choice.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. That traditionalist view acts as a very sophisticated rationalization for cowardice.
Cowardice, really?
Yes, absolutely. You are employing economic terms to sanitize what is fundamentally a psychological tragedy. From a psychological perspective, staying out of a sheer terror of the unknown turns the shared marital bed into a psychological prison.
I think that's a bit of an exaggeration.
Let me just finish this thought. These couples aren't staying out of a noble commitment to a contract. They are staying because of a textbook manifestation of the sunk cost fallacy. It guarantees a slow, agonizing psychological death.
Let me stop you right there, because using terms like psychological death feels, well, a bit theatrical. Let's actually look at what we are calling a marriage here. A marriage is not a fairy tale, right?
No, but it shouldn't be a prison either.
But it was never historically designed to be a perpetual state of romantic infatuation. It is an institution built for stability, not constant emotional high-wire acts.
But we aren't talking about losing the infatuation phase, you know? We are talking about becoming complete strangers.
Sure, but let's explore how that happens. When you have invested 15 years into building a life with someone, the nature of your interactions will fundamentally change. The source material points out that conversations become purely transactional.
Right, like who's paying the electric bill?
Exactly. Who's paying the bills? Who's picking up the kids from soccer practice? I argue that this is perfectly normal for adults navigating middle age. Think of a long-term marriage like a mature corporate merger.
A corporate merger, okay.
When two entities combine over a decade or more, they build massive, intertwined infrastructure. Walking away from that merger just because the initial startup thrill is gone is selfish. Choosing the familiar, choosing to maintain the infrastructure you have built together is the very essence of commitment.
Okay, I hear the corporate merger analogy, and I think it actually proves my point beautifully. Yes, it's like a merger. You have entirely entangled IT systems, shared assets, combined departments.
Which are highly valuable.
But if you're listening to this and you're in your 40s, you know what those entangled IT systems are in real life. It is your shared friend group. It is the routine you have with your in-laws. It's the custody of the family dog.
Yeah, untangling those systems is a nightmare.
A total nightmare. But if the core software of that merged company is utterly corrupted, if it is crashing every single day, you don't just keep it running because you spent a decade installing it.
But is the software corrupted, or is it just running quietly in the background? You're applying the sunk cost fallacy to this, but I think you're misapplying the economic principle to a sociological reality.
How so?
Well, by definition, a sunk cost is a cost that has already been incurred and cannot be recovered. You're taught to ignore them when making future decisions. But human lives are not balance sheets. The elements keeping these couples together are not unrecoverable, dead assets.
They are dead assets when they no longer provide any human connection.
But they provide tangible dividends. If you have a functioning household that provides a stable environment for your teenagers, if you have a paid-down mortgage, those are active dividends.
Financial dividends, maybe.
When a couple in their late 40s looks at the prospect of starting over, they aren't looking at some abstract loss. They are looking at literally dividing their 401ks in half. They are severing their social circles. Protecting that financial and structural stability at that stage in life is a highly rational calculation.
So it's just about money for you?
It's about reality. They are not choosing familiar misery, they are choosing tangible stability over guaranteed structural devastation.
You were defining rationality purely in logistical terms while completely ignoring the mechanism of what is happening in the brain. They are choosing the familiar misery because they are terrified.
Terrified of losing what they built?
Let's talk about why they don't leave. It comes down to loss aversion. Mechanistically, our brains are hardwired to prioritize not losing things over gaining new things.
Right, because losing things threatens survival. That makes evolutionary sense.
Exactly. In the brain, specifically in the amygdala, the threat of losing your house or your social circle registers as a literal threat to your survival. We feel the pain of a loss twice as intensely as we feel the potential joy of a future gain.
Which is why staying makes sense.
No, wait. So when these individuals look at the 15 years they've invested, their brain sounds an alarm. The financial entanglement you call a dividend is the exact mechanism of their imprisonment.
I wouldn't call it an imprisonment.
They convince themselves that the routine is worth more than their fundamental human need for connection, because their amygdala is screaming at them not to disrupt the status quo.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. If the amygdala is screaming, don't disrupt the status quo, maybe it's right. Maybe society today sets incredibly unrealistic expectations for what a marriage should provide.
Unrealistic?
Yes, we are conditioned to believe that a marriage must be this endless vehicle for perpetual self-actualization. If the butterflies fade, we are told the marriage has failed. But for the vast majority of human existence, marriage was explicitly an economic and child-rearing partnership.
We don't live in the agrarian era anymore. We expect more out of our only life than mere survival.
But the psychological exhaustion of modern life is exactly why this phase happens. Two adults exhausted from careers, raising teenagers, managing a household, they physically do not have the bandwidth for sweeping romance.
But it's not just a lack of romance.
Conversations about bills and kids aren't a sign that the software's corrupted, to use your analogy. They are the sound of a household functioning. Pathologizing this normal, mature adult life as a psychological prison suggests that if you aren't perfectly fulfilled every day, you are a victim. Accepting the transactional nature of middle-aged marriage is a sign of psychological maturity.
That's a compelling argument. But have you considered that there is a vast, unbridgeable chasm between not having the bandwidth for sweeping romance and the terrifying reality described in our source material?
A chasm?
Yes. We are not talking about being too tired for date night. We are talking about a deafening silence in the bedroom. In a healthy, mature marriage, yes, you have transactional conversations. Did you take out the recycling? Can you pick up the kids? But those conversations are layered over a foundation of mutual recognition.
You're saying there's an undercurrent of intimacy even when the surface is boring.
Precisely. You know the person. But in the sunk cost roommate phase, those transactional conversations are the only thing left. And here is the how of it. Those conversations are actively used as a shield.
A shield against what?
Against the truth. If a couple only talks about the gutters or the soccer schedule, they never have to look at each other and acknowledge the terrifying reality that the connection is entirely severed. They are shielding themselves from the silence. Serving a life sentence together out of fear, simply because society historically viewed marriage as an economic unit, is a tragedy.
But if we accept your premise that someone should blow up their life the moment they feel they are sleeping next to a stranger, we are advocating for a society of profound instability.
It's about personal fulfillment, not societal instability.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because it elevates temporary emotional states above permanent structural commitments.
A decade of silent resentment is not a temporary emotional state.
Emotions ebb and flow over a 40-year lifespan. You might feel your spouse is a stranger at year 15 and rediscover them completely at year 20. I've seen the literature on this.
The U-shaped happiness curve.
Exactly. Marital satisfaction typically hits its lowest point in the middle-age years, when child-rearing and financial stress are at their absolute peak, and then it rebounds significantly in the late 50s and 60s.
But you are assuming they rebound with the same person, or that they even survive the psychological toll of those middle years without completely losing their sense of self.
If you walk away at year 15 to start over simply because the relationship feels disconnected, you are engaging in a destructive fantasy. You dismantle the family unit, fracture your children's foundation, and destroy the wealth you built together, all in the pursuit of an elusive spark.
It's not just a spark, it's connection.
The maturity I am speaking of is the fortitude to sit in that discomfort. It is the ability to recognize that you made a vow and to uphold your end of the contract even when the emotional dividends are temporarily low. Abandoning ship because the waters are calm and uninteresting is not a brave pursuit of happiness. It is a profound failure of resilience.
I come at it from a completely different way. You frame staying as an act of fortitude and resilience. I reframe it as the ultimate act of cowardice.
Cowardice? How is maintaining a family unit cowardly?
Because it takes virtually no bravery to stay in a comfortable, temperature-controlled house with someone you silently resent, just letting the years slip by. It requires zero courage to hide behind the excuse of social status and maintaining the contract.
That's a bit harsh.
You want to talk about fortitude? What actually requires fortitude is looking at your life at age 45 or 50, acknowledging that the person beside you is a stranger, and stepping out into the terrifying unknown void to reclaim your authenticity.
And what does that authenticity usually buy them? They end up alone.
Sometimes, but let's look at the abandoning ship metaphor you used. These individuals are not abandoning ship because the waters are calm. They are abandoning ship because the ship has been quietly taking on water for a decade, and they are drowning in the hull while pretending everything is fine on the deck.
Well, if they communicated better.
Let's talk about the vows you mentioned, the marriage contract. Most people make those vows in their 20s.
Which are meant to be for a lifetime. That's the definition of the vow.
But neurobiologically, a 25-year-old is vastly different from a 45-year-old. Clinging to a life-altering decision made by a 25-year-old version of yourself, a version who lacked the life experience to know what they truly needed, simply because you are terrified to admit a mistake, is tragic.
People grow together.
Or apart. We are talking about sacrificing the entire second half of your life purely to avoid admitting that this old decision no longer works. It takes far more bravery to face the daunting prospect of starting over in middle age than to hide inside that psychological prison.
Yet that pursuit of authenticity often results in individuals finding themselves in their 50s with half their wealth, realizing that the new relationships they form are subject to the exact same natural decay over time.
You're assuming decay is inevitable.
It is. The dopamine fades in the new relationship too, so they trade a familiar roommate for a series of unfamiliar ones, having sacrificed the one person who actually shared their history.
You think shared history is enough to sustain a human being?
I think shared history has profound intrinsic value that our culture vastly underestimates. Even if the person feels like a stranger now, they are the stranger who was there when your parents died. They are the stranger who helped raise your children. They know your idiosyncrasies without you having to explain them.
That is true.
Discarding that share history because the present moment is marked by a deafening silence ignores the cyclical nature of human connection. The traditionalist perspective does not say, stay and be miserable. It says, stay, because the grass is not greener on the other side. The structure you built together has value that supersedes your current emotional deficit.
Shared history is a beautiful thing to honor. I will grant you that. But it is a terrible reason to endure decades of future misery. You can honor the history you had with someone while still acknowledging that the relationship's lifespan has concluded.
That sounds good in theory.
It works in practice, too. You can say, we did a great job raising these kids, but our romantic partnership is over.
But practically, how do you untangle that without destroying what you've built?
Couples completely forfeit their future. They tell themselves that starting over is too risky, that they might end up alone.
Which is a valid fear.
But the source material strikes at the very heart of this illusion. They are already alone. They are already experiencing the horror of dying of loneliness while lying right next to someone.
You don't think there is a difference between being physically alone and feeling misunderstood by a spouse?
I think there is no loneliness more acute, no isolation more profound than being in the exact same room with the person who is supposed to know you best and realizing they do not know you at all. When you are single and alone, there is at least the hope of future connection.
And in a marriage?
When you are lying next to a stranger in a marriage, the isolation is suffocating because the space where love should be is occupied by a ghost. By staying to avoid being alone, they are guaranteeing the exact outcome they fear most. They are just ensuring their loneliness has a witness.
That is a remarkably grim way to view a long-term partnership. As we look at both sides of the coin here, I maintain my perspective on this deeply complex issue. Honoring the profound tangibles of a 15 or 20-year marriage is a reflection of mature reality.
Even if it hurts.
Yes, the financial stability, the shared household, the historical investment, these are not fallacies to be discarded. They are the literal foundation of an adult life. To walk away from this built environment simply because the emotional landscape has shifted into a transactional or even silent phase is to underestimate the value of structural commitment.
I just can't agree with that.
It overestimates the promise of starting over. Fortitude often looks like staying the course when the romance fades.
And I maintain that staying the course when the connection has fundamentally died is a tragic surrender to fear. It is the sunk cost fallacy in its most destructive form.
Well, we see it differently.
We do. The infrastructure of a marriage should support the individuals within it. It should not serve as a cage holding them hostage. We have to recognize the immense psychological toll of choosing familiar misery over the terrifying unknown. It is a sacrifice of the second half of one's life, driven entirely by the fear of undoing a decision made decades prior. True bravery is acknowledging when the marital bed has become a psychological prison and finding the courage to break free.
Despite our diametrically opposed frameworks, we do arrive at a chilling point of convergence. The scariest part of this dynamic, as we look deeply into the reality of these modern marriages, isn't the intense arguing. It isn't the overt conflict over finances or infidelity.
No.
It is the deafening silence. It is the profound, quiet realization that one might be actively, daily, choosing a familiar prison over the mere chance at real happiness.
We leave the heavy burden of that choice to you, the listener. As we conclude today's discourse, we leave you with this thought to consider.
Look at the empty space between you and that bed.
Is that really where you want to spend the rest of your life? Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is get up and walk out the door.